The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September 1878, and when Levi Sullivan read the words scrawled across the yellow paper, his hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it into the water trough outside the general store in Seligman, Arizona Territory. Arriving October 3rd. Theodora Ramsey, 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks to prepare for a wife he had never met. A woman who claimed in her letters to have studied the heavens at some fancy college back east. A woman who had responded to his awkward advertisement with phrases he had to look up in the dictionary the schoolmarm kept at her house. Levi folded the telegram carefully and slipped it into his vest pocket, right next to his heart, where it seemed to burn through the cotton fabric. The sun blazed overhead as he walked back to his ranch, 5 miles outside of town where the red rocks stretched toward an impossibly blue sky. His boots kicked up dust with each step, and sweat trickled down his spine beneath his work shirt. At 26 years old, Levi had built something from nothing in this harsh territory. 200 acres, 60 head of cattle, a sturdy house with glass windows and a stone fireplace. But every night he ate alone, slept alone, watched the stars alone from his porch, and wondered what it would be like to share this life with someone who might understand the loneliness that came with so much beauty. He had never expected someone like Theodora to answer his advertisement. Most mail-order brides were practical women fleeing poverty or scandal, seeking security rather than companionship. But Theodora's letters had been different. She wrote about celestial mechanics and the rotation of distant planets, about growing up in Boston watching the stars from her father's observatory, about losing her position at a women's college when funding had dried up and her gender had made her expendable. She wrote about wanting to see the western sky, where she had heard the stars shone brighter than anywhere on Earth. Levi had written back honestly, perhaps too honestly. He told her about the isolation, the heat, the occasional Apache raids though things had been peaceful lately, the backbreaking work, the dust that got into everything. He told her he was not educated, that he had learned to read from his mother before she died, and had taught himself the rest from whatever books he could get his hands on. He told her he could offer her safety and a home, but he could not promise her the kind of intellectual companionship she was probably used to. She had written back anyway. And now she was coming. The house looked smaller when he approached it with fresh eyes, trying to see it as a stranger might. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all in one. 2 bedrooms branched off from it, one he used and one that stored supplies and saddles and things he had not found another place for. An outhouse stood behind the main structure, and a barn housed his 2 horses and provided shelter for the cattle during bad weather. Levi spent the next 3 weeks in a frenzy of activity. He cleared out the 2nd bedroom, scrubbing every surface until his hands were raw. He built a proper bed frame and bought a mattress from the general store, along with clean white sheets that cost more than he wanted to spend. He repaired the leak in the roof he had been meaning to fix for months. He even planted wildflowers in a patch of dirt near the front door, watering them carefully each morning and evening, praying they would not die before Theodora arrived. The morning of October 3rd dawned clear and cool, the first hint of autumn in the air. Levi dressed in his best clothes, a dark suit he had bought for church services he rarely attended, and rode into Seligman to meet the afternoon stage. His heart hammered against his ribs as he waited outside the depot, hat in his hands, running through possible greetings in his mind, and discarding each one as inadequate. The stage arrived in a cloud of dust and the thunder of hooves, 4 horses straining against their harnesses as the driver pulled them to a stop. Levi watched as 2 men disembarked first, followed by an older woman with a suspicious expression, and then her. Theodora Ramsay was not beautiful in the conventional sense. She was tall, nearly as tall as Levy himself, with a long face and a prominent nose. Her hair, a nondescript brown, was pulled back in a severe bun, and her traveling dress was a practical dark blue wool despite the heat. But when she looked around, squinting against the bright Arizona sun, her eyes were the most extraordinary shade of gray-green, intelligent and alert, and taking in everything with an intensity that made Levy's breath catch. "Miss Ramsay," he said, stepping forward, his voice coming out rougher than he intended, those remarkable eyes fixed on him, and a slow smile transformed her serious face. "Mr. Sullivan, I would have known you anywhere from your description." He had told her he was tall and dark-haired and unremarkable, which had apparently been accurate enough. "Welcome to Seligman," he said, then felt immediately foolish. "I mean, welcome to Arizona territory. Did you have a good journey?" "Long," she said, and her voice carried the crisp consonants of a Boston education. "But educational. I had no idea the landscape could be so varied. The rock formations alone are fascinating from a geological perspective." Levy helped her retrieve her trunk from the top of the stage. It was surprisingly heavy, and when she saw him struggling slightly, she said, "Books, mostly." "I hope that is acceptable. I could not bear to leave them all behind." "Books are always acceptable," Levy said, thinking of his own meager shelf of volumes, wondering what she would think of his collection. They loaded the trunk into his wagon, and Theodora climbed up to the seat without waiting for assistance, arranging her skirts with efficient movements. As they drove out of town toward his ranch, Levy found himself tongue-tied, all his prepared conversation evaporating in the face of her actual presence. It was Theodora who broke the silence. "Your letters mentioned you watch the stars. Do you use a telescope?" "No, madam, just my eyes." "I know some of the constellations, learned them from a book, but I do not have formal knowledge like you do." "Formal knowledge," she repeated, and there was something bitter in her tone. "Formal knowledge that got me nowhere in the end. You know what they told me when they dismissed me from the college? That it was unseemly for a woman to spend her nights staring at the heavens when she should be thinking of more earthly concerns. As if the stars care whether I am a man or a woman." "The stars do not care about much of anything, I reckon," Levy said. "They just shine regardless." She looked at him with something that might have been approval. "That is a more philosophical statement than I expected." "I have a lot of time to think out here," he said. "Not much else to do most evenings except think and watch the sky." The ranch appeared on the horizon, the house looking small and vulnerable against the vast expanse of desert and sky. Levy saw Theodora take it in, her expression unreadable. He wished suddenly that he had built something grander, something worthy of a woman who had studied at a college, who spoke of celestial mechanics and geological formations. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "I did not expect it to be so beautiful." Something in Levy's chest loosened. "Wait until you see it at sunset. The whole sky turns colors you would not believe." He helped her down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood there in the dusty yard, two strangers bound by promises made in letters, unsure of the next step. Finally, Levy picked up her trunk and carried it inside, setting it down in the main room. "I prepared a bedroom for you," he said, gesturing to the room he had spent so much time cleaning. "You will have your privacy. I sleep in the other room. We can marry whenever you feel ready." "There is no rush." Theodora walked slowly through the house, examining everything with that same intense attention she had given the town. She paused at his bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. He had Shakespeare and Plato, a battered copy of Homer's Odyssey, a few dime novels he was embarrassed about now, and his astronomy book, the one he had ordered from a catalog 3 years ago and studied until he had memorized every page. "May I?" she asked, pulling out the astronomy book. "Of course." She opened it carefully, turning pages, and he saw her eyebrows raise. The margins were filled with his notes, observations he had made, questions he had written to himself. "You have been thorough," she said. "I wanted to understand," he said simply. She closed the book and replaced it on the shelf, then turned to face him fully. "Mr. Sullivan, I should be honest with you about why I came here. I had no other prospects. My father died 2 years ago, leaving debts I could not pay. I lost my position, and my cousins made it clear I was not welcome to impose upon their charity indefinitely. When I saw your advertisement, I thought it might be a practical arrangement. I did not expect kindness. I did not expect someone who plants flowers and fills books with questions about the universe. I cannot promise you a life like you had in Boston," Levy said, "but I can promise you that you will be respected here. You can study whatever you like, and I will help however I can. And maybe in time we might find more than just a practical arrangement." "I would like that," Theodora said, and her smile was genuine this time, reaching those extraordinary eyes. "I would like that very much." They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Seligman. The ceremony was simple, witnessed by the general store owner and his wife, conducted in the small church that served the scattered population of the area. Theodora wore a dress of deep green that brought out the color in her eyes, and Levy wore his suit again, brushed clean of trail dust. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Levy kissed her cheek gently, formally, and felt her fingers tighten on his arm. They had a meal at the town's only restaurant, and then they rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. That night, they sat on the porch as the sky performed its daily miracle. Theodora watched in silence as oranges and reds and purples painted themselves across the endless expanse, fading gradually into the deep blue of twilight. And then the stars began to appear, one by one, then dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, more stars than Levy had ever seen in his life. "My God," Theodora whispered, "I have never seen so many." "No city lights to interfere," Levy said. "No smoke or haze, just pure sky." She stood and walked out into the yard, tilting her head back, slowly turning in a circle. "I can see the Andromeda Galaxy without a telescope." "Do you see it there? That faint smudge?" Levy joined her, following her pointing finger. "I always wondered what that was. A galaxy like our own, so far away its light takes millions of years to reach us. We are looking at the past, Levy. Those photons began their journey long before humans walked the earth." He had never heard anyone speak his name quite like that, with such enthusiasm and wonder. "Can you teach me?" he asked. "All the things you know, if you teach me about this land," she said. "I know stars, but I know nothing of cattle or crops or survival out here." "Deal," he said and held out his hand. She shook it solemnly, and then she laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the darkness. "I never shook hands with my husband before." "There is a first time for everything," Levy said. And daringly, he kept holding her hand after the shake ended, their fingers intertwining naturally. They stood like that for a long time, hand in hand beneath a canopy of stars, and Levy felt the first stirrings of something more than hope. He felt the possibility of happiness. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised them both with its easiness. Theodora proved to be adaptable in ways Levy had not expected. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to tend the vegetable garden he had planted, to gather eggs from the chickens he kept. She was not naturally graceful at these tasks, approaching them with the same methodical determination she brought to everything. but she learned. In return, Levi found himself student to the most patient teacher he had ever known. Each evening after the work was done, they would sit outside and Theodora would map the heavens for him. She taught him the proper names of constellations he had known only by shape. She explained the planets and their orbits, the phases of the moon, the nature of comets and meteors. "There is so much we do not know," she said one night, about 3 weeks after their wedding. "So much we are only beginning to understand. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, and we are just starting to grasp the laws that govern it." "Does that frighten you?" Levi asked. "All that unknown?" "No," she said thoughtfully. "It excites me. Imagine what we might discover in the next 100 years, the next 1,000. Imagine what humans might achieve." "I cannot imagine 100 years from now," Levi admitted. "I can barely plan for next season." "That is because you live in the present," Theodora said. "You work with your hands, with tangible things. I live in abstractions and theories. Maybe we balance each other." They were sitting close together on the porch, close enough that Levi could smell the soap she used, lavender from a bar she had brought from Boston. He found himself thinking about kissing her, really kissing her, not the chaste touches they had shared so far. But uncertainty held him back. Their marriage was still so new, still finding its shape. It was Theodora who made the first move. She turned to him in the starlight and said, "Levi, I know this arrangement began as something practical, but I want you to know that I have come to care for you. Truly." His heart jumped. "I care for you too, more than I thought possible in such a short time." "Then why do we sleep in separate rooms?" she asked, direct as always. "Why do we dance around what we both seem to want?" "I did not want to presume," Levi said. "I wanted to give you time, let you choose." "I am choosing now," she said, and leaned forward to kiss him. Her lips were soft and warm, and when Levi kissed her back, he felt something slot into place inside him. Some piece he had not known was missing. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theodora stood and held out her hand. "Come to bed," she said simply. Levi followed her inside, his heart pounding, and that night they became husband and wife in truth, learning each other with hands and mouths and whispered words. Theodora was as bold and curious in this as she was in everything, and Levi tried to match her, to show her with his body what he still struggled to say with words. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Theodora traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "I never thought I would have this," she said quietly. "I thought I would spend my life alone with my books and telescopes. I did not realize how lonely I was until I was not lonely anymore." "I know exactly what you mean," Levi said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Levi woke in the morning to find Theodora still there, her hair loose around her shoulders and her face peaceful in sleep, he felt a surge of contentment so strong it almost frightened him. The seasons changed. Autumn deepened into winter, and the high desert grew cold at night. Levi taught Theodora to ride, putting her on his gentler horse and leading her around the property until she gained confidence. She was not a natural rider, sitting too stiffly at first, but she persevered until she could manage well enough to accompany him when he checked on the cattle. "They are remarkable creatures," she said one day, watching the herd move across a far pasture. "So much larger than I expected." "They are just cows," Levi said, amused. "Nothing is ever just anything," Theodora replied. "Everything deserves observation and wonder." That was so typically her that Levi had to lean over and kiss her, right there on horseback, which startled both horses and made Theodora laugh. Winter brought occasional snow to the high country around Seligman, dusting the red rocks with white that looked impossibly beautiful against the blue sky. Theodora marveled at it all, using some of her precious paper to sketch the landscape, trying to capture the strange beauty of the desert. It was during this time that Levi began to understand the depth of what Theodora had given up to come here. She tried not to speak of it, but sometimes he would find her reading one of her astronomy journals, months out of date, with a hunger in her eyes that hurt to see. She had no telescope, no way to conduct the kind of serious observations she had done at the college. She was limited to naked eye astronomy, and while the dark skies offered incredible viewing, Levi knew it was not enough for someone of her training and passion. He began to save money, putting aside every spare dollar he could from selling cattle and horses. He wrote letters to catalogs, pricing telescopes, trying to understand the complicated specifications. In February, he rode into Tucson on the pretense of buying supplies, and he sought out a professor at the small college there, asking for advice. The professor, a kind man named Dr. Williamson, listened to Levi's halting explanation and nodded thoughtfully. "A refracting telescope would be best for general observation," he said. "More durable than a reflector, easier to maintain. I can recommend a model if you are serious about this." "I am very serious," Levi said. The telescope cost more money than Levi had spent on anything except land, but he ordered it anyway, arranging for it to be delivered to Seligman in March. Keeping it secret from Theodora was difficult. She noticed his distraction, asked him several times if something was wrong. "Nothing is wrong," he assured her. "In fact, everything is very right." The telescope arrived on a Tuesday, packed in a sturdy wooden crate. Levi intercepted it in town and hid it in the barn, wrapped in oilcloth. He spent a week reading the instruction manual, setting it up in secret while Theodora was occupied with household tasks, learning how to adjust the focus and position it properly. On the night of March 15th, their 6-month anniversary, Levi led a puzzled Theodora out to a spot behind the barn where he had set up the telescope, pointing it at Jupiter, which hung bright and steady in the eastern sky. Theodora stopped dead when she saw it, her hand flying to her mouth. "Levi, what did you do?" "Look through it," he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. She approached the telescope like it was something holy, positioning herself carefully at the eyepiece. She was silent for a long moment, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet with tears. "I can see the moons," she whispered. "I can see Jupiter's moons. Levi, do you understand what this means? We can see Io and Europa and Ganymede right here from our ranch." "I hoped you would like it," he said, feeling suddenly uncertain. "If it is not the right kind, or if I should have gotten a different model, I can write to them and ask about exchanging it." She kissed him then, deeply and thoroughly, and when she pulled back she was laughing and crying at the same time. "It is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe you did this. You gave up everything to come here," Levi said. "The least I can do is give you back a little piece of what you lost." They spent the entire night with the telescope, taking turns viewing Jupiter and Mars, examining the craters of the moon in stunning detail, marveling at the double star Albearo with its contrasting blue and gold components. Theodora was nearly incoherent with joy, pointing out features and explaining phenomena, her hands moving in animated gestures as she talked. "We should keep records," she said as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. "Systematic observations. I can write papers, send them to the journals. Just because I am no longer at a college does not mean I cannot contribute to the field." "I will help however I can," Levi promised. And he did. Over the following months, their evening routine expanded to include careful observations and meticulous note-taking. Theodora tracked the positions of planets, recorded the appearance of meteor showers, monitored variable stars. Levy learned to assist her, writing down her dictated observations, helping her with calculations, making sure they had hot coffee during long winter nights of viewing. She submitted her first paper in May, a detailed analysis of Mars during opposition. When the journal accepted it for publication 3 months later, she wept with relief and vindication. "They published it," she said, reading the letter over and over. "They published my work." "Of course they did," Levy said. "It is good work, important work. They did not even question it because I submitted under T. Ramsey and they probably assumed I was a man." Her voice was bitter. "But I do not care, it is published. My observations from our ranch are now part of the scientific record." More papers followed. Theodora became prolific, driven by the crystal-clear skies and the long dark nights. She entered into correspondence with other astronomers, always carefully gender-neutral in her letters, and built a reputation for thorough, reliable observations. The ranch became known, in certain scientific circles, as Ramsey Observatory, though it consisted of nothing more than a woman, a telescope, and the vast Arizona sky. Levy watched his wife blossom in this work, saw her come alive in ways she had only hinted at before. And he fell more deeply in love with her with each passing day, with her fierce intelligence and her boundless curiosity, with the way she approached everything from baking bread to calculating orbital mechanics with the same determined focus. Summer of 1879 brought challenges. A drought settled over the territory, making water scarce and turning the already harsh landscape even more unforgiving. Levy spent long days managing his herd, moving them to where sparse grass still grew, hauling water from increasingly distant sources. Theodora helped however she could, but the heat affected her badly. She was not built for this climate, her fair skin burning easily, her Boston-bred constitution struggling with temperatures that regularly exceeded 100 degrees. Still, she persisted, working beside Levy even when he begged her to rest in the shade. "We are partners," she said firmly. "Partners share the burdens." One particularly brutal afternoon in August, Theodora fainted while drawing water from the well. Levy caught her before she hit the ground, terror flooding through him as he felt how hot her skin was, how fast her pulse raced. He carried her inside, stripped off her heavy outer clothing down to her chemise, and spent the next hours sponging her with cool water, forcing small sips of liquid between her cracked lips, praying desperately that she would be all right. She woke as the sun was setting, disoriented and weak. "What happened? You overheated," Levy said, relief making his voice sharp. "You could have died, Theodora. You have to be more careful." "I was only drawing water," she protested, "in the middle of the afternoon in August in the desert." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated and frightened in equal measure. "You have to listen to your body. Work early in the morning or late in the evening. Rest during the heat of the day. I cannot lose you." The raw emotion in his voice seemed to reach her. She took his hand, squeezing weakly. "I am sorry. I did not realize how affected I was until it was too late. Promise me you will be more careful," Levy said. "I promise." After that, they adjusted their routines to accommodate the brutal summer heat. They rose before dawn to work, rested during the afternoon hours, resumed activity in the evening. It meant their nights were shorter, but they managed. September brought relief from the heat and something else. Theodora's monthly courses failed to appear. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely, but by October there was no denying it. She was pregnant. "Are you happy?" she asked Levy nervously when she told him. They had never discussed children explicitly, both of them so focused on building their partnership that the possibility of expanding their family had remained abstract. "Happy. Levy repeated, then laughed, picking her up and spinning her around despite her protests. I am more than happy. I am overjoyed. Put me down before you drop me, Theodora said, but she was laughing too. We are going to have a baby, Levy. I am going to be a mother. And I am going to be a father. The enormity of it hit him then. A child. Their child. I hope I know how to do this. We will learn together, Theodora said, just like we have learned everything else. The pregnancy progressed well. Theodora continued her astronomical work through the winter, though she could no longer stay out for the extended sessions she preferred as her belly grew and the cold affected her more. Levy worried constantly, fussing over her in ways that she found both endearing and exasperating. I am pregnant, not dying, she said in February when he insisted on helping her to a chair for the third time in an hour. I know, but I want to take care of you. You do take care of me. You take wonderful care of me. She took his hand and placed it on her swollen stomach. Feel that? The baby is kicking. Levy felt the flutter of movement beneath his palm and was struck speechless with wonder. There was a person in there, a whole new person they had created together. Hello, little one, he said softly. We cannot wait to meet you. Their son was born on a warm April evening in 1880, delivered by the midwife from town after a labor that lasted 12 hours and left Theodora exhausted but triumphant. Levy held his newborn son, red-faced and squalling, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. What should we name him? He asked Theodora, who was watching them with tired but happy eyes. I was thinking of Thomas, she said. After my father, Thomas Sullivan. Thomas Sullivan, Levy repeated, testing the name. The baby quieted at the sound of his voice, tiny fingers curling and uncurling. Welcome to the world, Thomas. Parenthood transformed their lives in ways both expected and surprising. Thomas was a demanding baby, colicky and fussy, sleeping in short bursts that left both Levy and Theodora perpetually exhausted. But he was also perfect, with Theodora's serious gray-green eyes and Levy's dark hair, curious and alert even as an infant. Theodora struggled initially with the constant demands of motherhood. She was accustomed to intellectual pursuits, to long periods of focused work, and the fragmentary nature of caring for an infant frustrated her. More than once, Levy found her in tears, overwhelmed and guilty about feeling overwhelmed. I love him, she would say. I love him so much, but I miss my work. I miss being able to think for more than 5 minutes at a time. Does that make me a terrible mother? It makes you human, Levy assured her, and we will figure it out. Maybe I can take Thomas for a few hours each day so you can work. We will find a way. They did find a way eventually. Levy took over more of the baby care than was typical for fathers of that era, wearing Thomas in a sling while he did ranch work, becoming expert at soothing and feeding and diaper changing. It scandalized some of the town women when they visited Seligman, but Levy did not care. His wife needed to work, needed to use her brilliant mind, and he would do whatever was necessary to make that possible. By the time Thomas was 6 months old, they had established a workable routine. Theodora resumed her observations, though on a reduced schedule. She published several more papers, her reputation growing steadily. Letters arrived regularly from astronomers around the world, all addressed to T. Ramsay, all assuming she was male. Should I tell them? She asked Levy one evening. Should I reveal that I am a woman? What do you want to do? He asked. She considered. I want my work to stand on its own merits. If they knew I was a woman, some would dismiss it immediately, look for flaws and errors they would overlook in a man's work. So no, I will not tell them. Let them make their assumptions. The work is what matters. The work is what matters, Levy agreed. Thomas grew into a bright, active toddler who loved being outside and showed an early fascination with the night sky. Before he could even speak properly, he would point up at the stars and make excited sounds, and Theodora would name them for him, her voice soft with love. "He will be brilliant," she predicted. "He has your patience and my curiosity. Imagine what he might achieve." "He has time to figure out what he wants to be," Levy said. "For now, let him just be a child." In the spring of 1882, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was from the director of the Lick Observatory in California, addressed to T. Ramsey, requesting more information about the mysterious astronomer who had produced such consistently excellent observations from Arizona territory. "They want to know who I am," Theodora said, staring at the letter. "They are specifically asking about my background, my training, whether I have institutional affiliation." "What will you tell them?" Levy asked. Theodora was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "The truth. I will tell them the truth. And if they reject my work because I am a woman, then that is their loss." She wrote back, explaining her history, her education, her gender. The response took weeks to arrive, and Theodora grew increasingly anxious as the days passed. When the letter finally came, her hands shook as she opened it. Levy watched her face as she read, unable to interpret her expression. "They want me to visit," she said faintly. "They want me to come to California and consult on their observing program. They say my work is too valuable to ignore, regardless of my gender." She looked up at Levy, eyes shining. "They are taking me seriously. They are actually taking me seriously." "Of course they are," Levy said. "You are one of the best observers in the country. They would be fools not to take you seriously." "I would have to travel," Theodora said. "It would be weeks away from home, from you and Thomas." "Then we will come with you," Levy said. "I have never seen California. Thomas is old enough to travel. We will make a family adventure of it." So in June of 1882, the Sullivan family traveled by train to California, a journey that took 4 days and left all of them exhausted but excited. Thomas, now 2 years old, was fascinated by everything. The train, the changing landscape, the ocean when they finally reached it. The Lick Observatory was still under construction on Mount Hamilton, but the director, James Keeler, met with them in San Jose and spent 3 days in intense discussion with Theodora. Levy watched his wife in her element, speaking the specialized language of her field with an authority and confidence he had never quite seen before. She belonged in these discussions. She had earned her place. "Mrs. Sullivan," Keeler said on their final day, "I want to make you a formal offer. We would like you to serve as a consultant to the observatory once it opens. We cannot offer you a permanent position, not yet, but we can pay you for your observations and analysis. We can give you access to our telescopes when you visit, and we can acknowledge your contributions publicly." Theodora looked at Levy, a question in her eyes. He nodded encouragingly. "I accept," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Keeler. You do not know what this means to me." They returned to Arizona in July, and Theodora threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She had validation now, official recognition from one of the premier observatories in the country. More journals accepted her papers. More astronomers sought her opinion. But she never forgot where she had started, never took for granted the life she and Levy had built together. Every evening after Thomas was asleep and the work was done, they would sit on the porch together, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always aware of how lucky they were to have found each other. "You ever regret it?" Levy asked one night in the fall of 1883. "Answering my advertisement. Coming here instead of staying east and fighting for a position at a college." "Never," Theodora said without hesitation. "This is where I was meant to be. With Thomas under these stars. I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to want." "I feel the same way," Levy said. "I thought I was content before you came, but I did not know what I was missing." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars together, the same stars that had brought them together, that continued to be the foundation of their shared life. In 1884, Theodora discovered a comet. It was a small one, not particularly bright or spectacular, but it was hers, found during a systematic search of the sky she had been conducting for months. Following proper protocol, she reported it to the astronomical community, and after verification, it was officially designated Comet Ramsay. The attention that followed was unprecedented. Newspapers picked up the story, fascinated by the narrative of a female astronomer working from a remote ranch in Arizona. Reporters wanted interviews, which Theodora politely declined. She had no interest in becoming a curiosity or a sensation. She wanted to be respected for her work, not celebrated for defying gender expectations. But the discovery opened doors. Harvard College Observatory reached out, asking if she would contribute to their ongoing catalog of stellar positions. The United States Naval Observatory requested her assistance with timing observations. Slowly, steadily, Theodora built a career that existed outside traditional institutional structures, based entirely on the quality of her work. Levy supported her in all of it, proud beyond measure of what she had accomplished. He learned more astronomy to assist her better, became skilled at the mathematical calculations her work required. They were a team in the truest sense, each contributing their strengths to a shared endeavor. In 1885, Theodora became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, leaving her sick and exhausted for months. But in February of 1886, they welcomed a daughter into the world, a tiny, perfect girl with Levy's dark eyes and Theodora's determined expression. "Lucy," Theodora said, holding her newborn daughter. "I want to name her Lucy after Lucy Harding, who taught me at college and never doubted that women could be scientists." "Lucy Sullivan," Levy said. "It is a beautiful name." Thomas, now 5 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in his serious little voice, explaining about stars and planets and everything his mother had taught him. The Sullivan household grew louder and more chaotic with 2 children, but also fuller, richer. Levy expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a separate study for Theodora where she could work undisturbed. The ranch prospered, the cattle herd growing, their reputation for quality stock spreading throughout the territory. Arizona became a state in the national conversation, and Seligman grew from a dusty outpost to a proper town with a school, a church, several stores, and even a small library. The Sullivans became pillars of the community, respected for their hard work and Theodora's growing fame in scientific circles. In 1890, Theodora was invited to present a paper at the American Association for the Advancement of Science meeting in Indianapolis. It would be the first time she appeared publicly as herself, not as the mysterious T. Ramsay, but as Theodora Sullivan, wife, mother, and astronomer. "I am terrified," she admitted to Levy as they prepared for the journey. "What if they reject me in person? What if they treat me as a novelty rather than a colleague?" "Then they are fools," Levy said firmly. "And you will prove them wrong with your brilliance, just as you always have." Thomas and Lucy stayed with a neighbor, and Levy and Theodora traveled to Indianapolis together. Levy wore his best suit and felt hopelessly out of place among the educated scientists and academics who filled the conference hall. But Theodora held her head high, her hand gripping his tightly, and when she was introduced to present her paper, she walked to the podium with confidence. Levy listened to his wife speak about stellar spectroscopy and variable stars, using terms he mostly understood thanks to years of her patient teaching. He watched the audience, saw skepticism on some faces, curiosity on others. But as Theodora continued, presenting data and analysis that were irrefutable in their thoroughness and insight, the expressions changed. Doubt transformed into respect, dismissiveness into genuine interest. When she finished, there was a moment of silence and then applause. Not polite, obligatory applause, but real appreciation for work well done. Scientists clustered around her afterward, asking questions, requesting details, treating her as an equal. Levy felt tears prick his eyes. This was what Theodora had deserved all along: recognition, respect, a place in the scientific community she loved. And she had earned it through sheer determination and brilliance, despite every obstacle society had placed in her path. That night in their hotel room, Theodora collapsed into Levy's arms, shaking with relief and delayed reaction. "They listened," she said. "They actually listened to me." "Of course they did," Levy said, stroking her hair. "You are extraordinary, Theodora. You have always been extraordinary." They returned to Arizona as minor celebrities in the astronomical world. Invitations arrived regularly for conferences and consultations. Theodora accepted some and declined others, always mindful of her responsibilities to her family and her own work. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and stars. Thomas grew into a thoughtful boy who loved mathematics and reading, showing signs of inheriting his mother's analytical mind. Lucy was more adventurous, always climbing things she should not climb, asking endless questions about everything she encountered. In 1895, when Thomas was 15 and Lucy was 9, the Sullivan family made their second trip to California so Theodora could spend a month working at the now completed Lick Observatory. The children were old enough to appreciate the massive telescope, the precise instruments, the dedication of the astronomers who worked there. "Is this what you always wanted to do?" Thomas asked his mother one evening as they looked through the great telescope together. "I wanted to understand the universe," Theodora said. "The method mattered less than the pursuit, and I have been blessed to find a way to do it on my own terms with the support of people who believe in me." "Father believes in you more than anyone," Thomas observed. "He does," Theodora agreed, glancing across the room to where Levy was helping Lucy adjust the finder scope on a smaller telescope. "He made everything possible. He gave me a home, a family, and the freedom to be myself. That is the greatest gift anyone could receive." The turn of the century brought changes. The American West was becoming less wild, more settled. Railroads crisscrossed the territory, bringing goods and people. Electricity reached Seligman in 1901, and though the Sullivans were slow to wire their ranch, they eventually did, marveling at the convenience of electric lights. Theodora worried that light pollution would affect her observations, but the ranch was far enough from town that the impact was minimal. She continued her work, now in her 50s but still as passionate and curious as ever. Levy, too, had aged, his dark hair going gray, his face weathered by decades in the sun. But he was healthy and strong, still managing the ranch with the same attention to detail he had always brought to everything. In 1903, Thomas, now 23, married a young woman from Flagstaff, a teacher named Sarah. They settled on a portion of the Sullivan Ranch, building their own house with Levy's help. Lucy, 17 and headstrong, announced her intention to study medicine, shocking the family but also making them proud. "I want to help people," she said. The way Dr. Patterson helped us when Thomas broke his arm, and when Mother was so sick with pneumonia. I want to make a difference." "You will make a wonderful doctor," Theodora said, though her heart ached at the thought of Lucy leaving for the education she would need. Lucy enrolled at the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia in 1904, and the house felt empty without her fierce energy. But she wrote regularly, her letters full of enthusiasm for her studies and determination to succeed. In 1906, Thomas and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Levi after his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Levi felt the circle of life completing itself. He had built something lasting here, a family, a legacy, a place where brilliance was nurtured and love was paramount. "You are thinking profound thoughts," Theodora said, watching him rock the baby. "I am thinking how lucky I am," Levi said. "How that telegram in 1878 changed my entire life." "My telegram changed mine too," Theodora said. "I was so frightened when I sent it. I had no idea what I was committing to, what kind of man you would be, but I was desperate enough to take the chance. And now I cannot imagine any other life. This is exactly where I am meant to be." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in October of 1908. Thomas and Sarah hosted a party at their house, and Lucy came home from Philadelphia, nearly finished with her medical training. Friends from town and neighboring ranches gathered to celebrate, and there were toasts and laughter and stories shared. Levi stood to speak, his voice strong despite his 56 years. "30 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I was lonely and hoping for companionship, maybe partnership if I was lucky. What I got was so much more. Theodora, you are the great love of my life. You are my best friend, my colleague, my partner in all things. You made me a father, a grandfather, a better man. You showed me stars I never knew existed, not just in the sky but in life itself. I love you more today than I did when we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Theodora was crying openly, and when Levi sat down, she kissed him in front of everyone, not caring about propriety or decorum. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate astronomer from Boston." In 1910, Halley's Comet made its predicted return, and the Sullivan Ranch became an unofficial observation post. Astronomers from around the country wrote to Theodora, requesting her observations, and she threw herself into systematic study of the comet through its entire apparition. Levi helped as he always had, recording data, managing the logistics, making sure his wife ate and rested during the long nights of observation. At 58, he was not as young as he once was, but he was still strong, still devoted, still learning. They watched the comet together on a warm May night, a celestial visitor that would not return for another 76 years. "We will not see it again," Theodora said quietly. "No," Levi agreed, "but others will. Thomas might if he lives long enough. Young Levi certainly will. The universe continues, regardless of us." "That is both humbling and comforting," Theodora said. "It is," Levi agreed and held her hand as they watched the ancient ice and rock streak across the sky, a reminder of the vastness they were part of. Lucy completed her medical training in 1911 and returned to Arizona, setting up practice in Flagstaff. She visited the ranch regularly, often bringing medical journals that discussed the latest advances in treatment and diagnosis. The conversations between mother and daughter were fascinating to listen to. Two brilliant women in different fields finding common ground in their love of knowledge and discovery. In 1914, Europe erupted into war. The conflict seemed distant at first, but as it dragged on, it began to affect even remote Arizona. Lucy enlisted as an army doctor in 1917, determined to help, and Theodora and Levi spent anxious months waiting for letters, praying for her safety. She returned in 1919, thinner and haunted but alive. "I saw terrible things," she said, "but I helped people, I saved lives, and I learned that I am stronger than I ever knew." The 1920s brought prosperity and change. Thomas's family grew to include 4 children, the ranch expanded, and Theodora was elected to the American Astronomical Society, one of the first women so honored. She continued her work well into her 60s, her mind as sharp as ever, her passion for the stars undimmed. Levi slowed down more noticeably now, letting Thomas take over more of the ranch management. But he still sat with Theodora every clear night, still helped with observations, still marveled at the universe they had spent so many years studying together. In the summer of 1928, on their 50th wedding anniversary, the family gathered again for a massive celebration. Thomas and his family, Lucy and her husband, a lawyer she had married in 1922, grandchildren ranging from toddlers to young adults, friends from decades of life in Arizona. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Levi and Theodora stood together, watching the party, and Levi felt profound gratitude for every moment of their shared life. 50 years, he said. It seems both impossibly long and far too short. "I want 50 more, Theodora said. "I will do my best to give them to you," Levi promised. They made it nearly 10 more years. In the spring of 1938, Levi fell ill with pneumonia. Despite Lucy's best efforts and all the advances in medical care, he did not recover. He died on a clear April night, with Theodora holding his hand and stars shining through the window of their bedroom. "I love you," Theodora whispered through her tears. "I have loved you from the moment you planted those flowers before I arrived. I will love you forever." Levi smiled, his breath shallow but his eyes clear. "The stars," he managed to say. "Look at our stars." Theodora looked up through the window at the brilliant field of light, the same stars they had watched together for nearly 60 years. When she looked back down, Levi was gone, his hand still warm in hers, his face peaceful. The grief was overwhelming. Theodora had lost her partner, her love, her best friend. The world felt emptier, the stars less bright without Levi to share them with. Her children gathered around her, supporting her through the funeral and the terrible days after, but nothing could quite fill the hole his absence left. It was Thomas who finally broke through her despair. "Mother," he said gently, a month after Levi's death, "Father would not want you to stop. He would want you to keep observing, keep discovering, keep contributing. Your work was his joy as much as yours." Thomas was right. Theodora returned to her telescope, to her observations, to the work that had defined so much of her life. It hurt to do it without Levi, but it also connected her to him, to all the nights they had spent together mapping the heavens. She continued working for another 15 years, publishing her final paper at the age of 85. By the time she retired, she had contributed to hundreds of astronomical publications, discovered 3 comets, and trained a generation of younger astronomers through her meticulous example. Theodora Sullivan died peacefully in her sleep in January of 1953, at the age of 87. She was buried beside Levi on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Arizona sky they had both loved so much. Their legacy lived on through their children and grandchildren. Thomas continued to run the ranch until his own death in 1965, passing it to his eldest son. Lucy became a prominent physician, pioneering treatments for diseases that affected rural populations, and lived to be 93. The Sullivan family remained in Arizona, generation after generation, always aware of the remarkable foundation Levi and Theodora had built. The telescope, carefully maintained, still stood at the ranch, used by great-great-grandchildren to view the same stars their ancestors had studied. And on clear nights, when the Milky Way stretched like a river of light across the darkness, those who knew the story would think of a lonely cowboy and a desperate astronomer who had found each other across thousands of miles, who had built a life together based on love, respect, and wonder. Levi had promised to show Theodora stars she had never seen, and he had kept that promise. But more than that, he had shown her a kind of love she had never imagined, a partnership that transcended the limitations society tried to impose, a home where she could be fully herself. And Theodora had given Levi the same gift, showing him that intelligence and curiosity could exist alongside hard work and practical living, that love could be both romantic and intellectual, that two people from entirely different worlds could create something beautiful together. Their story became legend in Seligman and the surrounding territory. People spoke of the Sullivan Ranch, where a mail-order bride had become one of the most respected astronomers of her generation, supported by a cowboy who had understood that love meant nurturing someone's dreams rather than constraining them. Schools taught about Theodora's contributions to science. Historical societies preserved her papers and journals. But the real legacy was simpler and more profound. A family that valued learning and kindness, curiosity and hard work, love in all its forms. On the anniversary of their first meeting each October, descendants would gather at the ranch. They would share a meal, tell stories, and then, as darkness fell, they would go outside to look at the stars. Someone would point out Comet Ramsay's path, even though it was long gone. Someone else would find Jupiter and its moons, the first thing Theodora had seen through the telescope Levi had given her. And they would remember two people who had taken a chance on each other, who had chosen love over fear, partnership over convention, and in doing so had created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. The desert night would wrap around them, cool and clear, and the stars would shine with that particular brilliance that only the high country could provide. And if they listened carefully, letting the silence of the vast landscape settle over them, they might almost hear it, the echo of a conversation between a cowboy and an astronomer, talking about the universe and their place in it, their voices full of wonder and love. Because that was what Levi and Theodora had understood, what they had taught their children and their children's children. That love was not just romance or passion, though it could be both those things. Love was also patience and support, was believing in someone when the world did not, was helping them reach for stars, both literal and metaphorical. Love was building something together, brick by brick, observation by observation, year by year, until you had created not just a marriage but a monument to what two people could achieve when they truly saw each other, valued each other, cherished each other. The stars did not care, just as Levi had once said. They shone regardless, indifferent to human joy or sorrow. But the humans beneath them cared deeply, and in that caring, in that connection, they found meaning that no amount of cosmic indifference could diminish. They found purpose, passion, belonging. They found home, and so the story ended as all good stories should, not with a final goodbye but with a continuation, a legacy that lived on in the people and the work and the love that Levi and Theodora had left behind. The ranch remained. The telescope remained. The carefully recorded observations remained, archived in observatories and universities. But most importantly, the example remained, a testament to what was possible when two people chose each other, truly and completely, and built a life of shared wonder. In Seligman, Arizona, where the sky still stretched impossibly vast and the stars still shone with breathtaking clarity. The Sullivan story was not forgotten. It could not be forgotten because it was written in the land itself, in the house Levi had built and Theodora had filled with books and instruments and love, in the hill where they rested together, in the descendants who carried their names and their values forward into new generations. The cowboy had indeed shown the astronomer stars she had never seen. But she had shown him something too. That love could be intellectual and emotional, practical and poetic, grounded in daily life but reaching always toward something greater. Together, they had proven that the best partnerships were not about finding someone exactly like you, but about finding someone who complemented you, challenged you, helped you become more than you could be alone. Their love story, born from a telegram and a leap of faith, had become something extraordinary not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Real love with all its challenges and compromises, its moments of frustration and its deeper currents of devotion. Real partnership, where both people contributed and both people grew. Real respect, where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the scientific papers or the successful ranch or even the large and loving family, though all those things mattered. The greatest legacy was the example they set, the proof they provided that love could transcend circumstance, that two people from vastly different backgrounds could create a shared life of profound meaning and joy. The stars continued to shine over the Sullivan Ranch, as they had for millions of years, and would for millions more. But for a brief, beautiful moment in cosmic time, a cowboy and an astronomer had watched them together, and in doing so had created their own constellation, their own pattern of meaning in the vast darkness. A pattern made of love and work and wonder, of quiet evenings and shared discoveries, of a partnership that had lasted a lifetime and then beyond, into memory and legend, and the continuing story of a family that still looked up at the night sky and remembered where they came from. That was their story, complete and whole, a love story set against the backdrop of the Wild West and the even wilder frontier of human knowledge, where a man and a woman had found each other and built something lasting under the stars they both cherished. It was a story with a happy ending, not because everything was always easy, but because they had chosen each other every single day through all the days of their long lives together. And that choice, repeated again and again, had made all the difference.